Good evening and welcome to Slam the Gavel, the show that tells it all regarding family court, other court issues, as well as CPS. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie. I have a brand new guest on. His name is Tim Goldich. He is an author who has devoted the last 30 years to researching, pondering, and writing a 4-book series on gender issues. The first book, Loving Men, Respecting Women, The Future of Gender Politics, was published in 2011 and is available on Amazon.com. The second book, Equal Partners: The History of Gender Equality, is due out in 2023. He has also created a series of YouTube videos under the umbrella title of Men Against the Wall. He is a board member of both the National Coalition for Men and of the Mankind Project, two organizations that variously support men politically and emotionally. He is NCFM Vice President and President of the Chicago chapter of NCFM. He was one of the editors of NCFM's Transitions, a journal of men's perspectives, the longest running journal of its kind. Tim Goldich facilitates the personal growth work of men on New Warrior Training Adventure weekends and of men and women on personal growth weekends called Path to Spirit. Tim's latest venture is the founding of a new internet-based organization calling itself Gender Equalist, transforming gender political space for unity, fairness, and forgiveness. I totally welcome you to Slam the Gavel. And boy, this was an undertaking. What got you involved in all of this?
Uh, well, I have no big gender political atrocity to report, like so many that have gotten involved in gender politics have had some really deep personal traumas around these issues, and then so they became obsessed with them. No, for me, it was just being a sort of an honorary part of a group of women, these 5 women. This was back in the about 1980 on up through like about 1990 or so. And I was just feeling sort of beat up by the feminist rhetoric, just sort
Mhm.
of, one of these friends of mine would have what I would call the feminist moment, and she'd sort of take me aside. I remember one, I even wrote it up for my book, in a shoe store, going, this is, so you look at these awful foot killers that I have to wear, and they cost more than your shoes, you see. And at the time, like men in general, even still to this day, I had no clue about what my perspective was on all these matters, right? I didn't have a PhD in masculism, I didn't take men's studies in college or university. So what did I know? So I went searching for something to give what I would thought was the other half, the other side of the coin, or whatever, and didn't find anything. They such books existed, but they're obscurity. I didn't find them. So um, I decided, well, if nobody's going to write this book, I will. And fortunately, I was 2 years invested in writing my own book before I discovered Warren Farrell's The Myth of Male Power, which sort of validated what I was all about, and also made me realize that I was going to have to up my game if I was going to compete on that level.
Mhm.
So that's how I got into it.
So you think like the feminist movement, ERA, it really hasn't accomplished that much.
Well, it depends on how you look at it. Yeah. See, I'm of the opinion that technology, domestic technology, workplace technology, absolutely fundamentally changed our human world in such a way that I think the depolarization of the sexes was rendered inevitable. To try and condense it real quick, yeah, and the world of men became more genteel, more safe, less arduous, less hazardous. Um, for the first time in history, muscle power was replaced by machine power. So in so many ways, the world of men became more conducive and more inviting to women than it had ever been before. And meanwhile, in the world of women, you had domestic technologies and birth control, which freed women up in a new way. So um, yeah, I'm not a fan of feminism. I think to have been truly constructive, feminism would have needed to be equalism. It would have needed to look at both sides. We need to look both at how women are less respected than men, but also at how men are less loved,
Mhm.
and looked at it in a balanced way. But that would have been inconceivable 50 years ago, or 100 years ago, or 1848 when the Seneca Falls, meeting took place. Those things were just not possible. Even today, it's very difficult to understand that female power equals male power,
Mhm.
that male victimization equals female victimization. That's a very hard sell out there,
Mhm.
but I believe it's true.
Mhm. Right, I think it's neck to neck.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. My sound bite is it all balances out. I say, in the
Mhm.
benefits and joy and the liabilities suffered, and the power of the victimization, the freedoms, the constraints, the joys, the sorrows, the good, the bad, light and shadow, all balances out between woman and man, and it always has.
Mhm.
And to understand that, you have to understand that uh, the enormous consequences and vast repercussions suffered by women for being less respected have been matched by the enormous consequences and vast repercussions suffered by men for being less loved. And the power also, the the female power that comes with being more loved has been matches the male power that comes with being more respected. So what we do in the future is up to us, but I think it's important to look at the past and the present in terms of a balance, and also understand that a balanced system is not the same thing as a perfect system. That the system is very imperfect, and there's enormous amounts to uh, to negotiate, to critique, to address all manner of gender political issues. I would just suggest that we first, woman and man, sort of call it even, and then take a second look at all these gender issues as matters of shared responsibility.
How did men become less loved? I I always thought, you know, men are loved like as if women are loved. I I don't
Uh,
not to sound stupid, but I didn't know.
well, we don't really look at or concern ourselves with what men face for being less loved, even though it's very obvious in family court.
Mhm.
Uh, um, we don't, because men do not elicit the necessary empathy that would cause us to look at what men suffer
Mhm.
in along the love axis, and men themselves contribute to this. Men don't want to know about their own victimization. They just it's the antithesis of what it means to be a man. Is you can't be a man and be a victim. I mean, it's just they're too contrary, and we're as a human society, we sort of have relied on men to be sort of expendable, or the gender political term is disposable. In war, hard hazardous labor, in
Mhm.
prisons, in
Mhm.
homelessness, in terms of men being sort of divorced from their own emotions, especially vulnerable emotions. We've needed them that way because we need a faction of humanity that's going to be invested in toughness, strength, and courage. Because somebody has to fell the trees and move the sewage and do the long distance trucking and
Mhm.
tuck point the buildings and protect us all from the air quotes enemy out there. And so this is the whole human system that we inherit.
Mhm.
I'm not saying we're stuck with it by any means. I'm just saying let's look at the past realistically as to what happened? How did we get here?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think it's these generations are so dysfunctional. I think that's contributed to it all evolving out this way for both
Yeah,
sexes.
yeah. I mean, I would say that the gender system was functional for thousands of years. It got us along, it got us through. It was efficient in a world where pre-science we didn't understand anything. We were constantly baffled by why things happen and having very little predictability. I think it was a comfort to humans to think, well, men are like this and women are like that, and then you got something sort of predictable about it. And I think that when the major emphasis, the deepest need of men and women was largely just around survival, and most people did not survive,
Mhm,
past 30 or 40.
mhm,
So it was a preoccupation. How do we survive? And men and women got together in a bonded pair as partners to help each other survive. And so it worked. There
mhm,
was a world of men and a world of women, and it worked. But now it doesn't work anymore,
mhm,
um, or at least as well as it did. And we're forced to take a deeper look at it. And feminism got the ball rolling, but unfortunately, it created gender politics under the assumption that men have the power, women are the victims, man bad, the overempowered oppressor, woman good, the innocent victim, and that resonates deeply on like psychologically, emotionally, instinctually, and it's a deep match for Eros. This this whole men have the power, women are the victims narrative. In its way, it's an erotic story because it's the story of empowered alphas,
mhm,
hot hunky heroes coming to the rescue of sweet, weak, beautiful, innocent damsels in distress, and
mhm,
that's a staple of the myths and the mythos that go all the way back, right? I mean,
mhm.
that's so so against these psychic forces, logic, fact, and logic don't stand a chance. And so uh, we've been re- we've been embracing all the facts and truths that verify men have the power, women are the victims, and we've been rejecting the mirror opposite facts and truths of female power and male victimization. They don't because they don't feel good. They just don't feel good to us.
Mhm. Well, even in they're still making films, like you were talking about, they're still perpetuating that the men will say the damsel in distress.
Yes.
It's still they're still playing into it. They're not, I guess, fixing it or putting in a different viewpoint. Um,
Well, now wait a minute. Now, I mean, there's a huge push toward women as the hero, woman as the indomitable spirit.
mhm,
There has been an enormous pushback. I wish the pushback were more conscious. I wish it were not so vengeance oriented.
mhm,
But there has been a huge effort to present women as the heroes, and
mhm.
unfortunately, they don't usually come to the rescue of men, though.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, you had Erin Brockovich, which was a good film
Uh
where
huh.
she was the hero. Um, Trying to think, the Marvel
Yeah,
with Wonder Woman.
sure. And Captain Marvel,
Yeah.
and look at the Star Wars. You got Ray, the character of Ray. She's a virtual infinity being. She can do anything, right? For the first
Mhm,
time she tries, she just picks up a lightsaber for the first time in her life and defeats a Sith Lord with it. I mean, yeah, I mean they're really kind of going a little overboard with it,
mhm.
trying to compensate for the past.
Well, I know you probably didn't watch the movie Twilight, the Twilight sagas, but
No, I haven't seen those.
okay, well, that was another one where the male was protecting the female at all times.
Uh,
You have to watch it because, it's got some good, um, effects where these people turn into wolves. It's really cool. Did you see Game of Thrones?
yes, I saw some Game of Thrones.
Yeah, right,
Uh-huh. It was
it's,
very good.
right, and the thing is, even there, men were protecting women,
Yes.
and
Yes, but notice though that that took place in some kind of imaginary ancient world
Mhm.
where everything was brutal.
Oh, yeah.
That's a key piece of it. Yes, and the brutal past, it was definitely incumbent upon men to protect women, especially pregnant women and children. I mean, that's certainly been a very important part of what men have been all about historically. It's just that, in a sense, all this danger that's used to be all around us from the elements and from animals and from I don't know what marauding bands of bad guys or whatever. Pretty much isn't not the case anymore. Protection is no longer a premium um, asset or commodity. It's so so yeah. When if you want to dig into the traditional gender schema these days, it works best if you go to into an imaginary world.
Mhm.
See,
Yeah, which, also brings in, how did male emotional dependence on women happen? Because
well,
I
it's clear. I didn't mean to cut you off. Do
Oh, go
you?
ahead. No, no, go ahead.
Well, it came with the roles that men and women played, and the roles I believe just derived out of biological necessity, and then they became uh, uh, augmented by our culture.
Mhm,
But for millennia, uh, men needed to be stoic and deal with the harshest and most hazardous realities. And and then when he got home, he needed the emotional support of his woman, just as she needed his material support.
mhm,
So that became ingrained, and that's been going on for so long. There's probably instinctual elements to it.
mhm, and all of this plays out in family court in very twisted ways,
Yes.
twisted beyond, sadistic.
Yeah, incredible. Right. People don't know.
No.
No idea how bad it is in family court. You hear stories and you can hardly believe them, but it's true. The whole thing has been corrupted beyond our. It's a money making machine. It's the morality and ethics have been just abandoned. Uh, People know this and they don't know what to do about it.
Mhm,
I mean, you had Chris Felder on,
mhm,
and he's talked with so many of these people
mhm.
deep in the system, and they know how bad it is. They know how corrupt it is, but they don't know how to fix it.
Well, I still find it interesting that there are people that actually believe the family court system is not corrupt. I just like
I know.
uh,
Well, you see, we're not allowed to put reporters in there. We're not allowed to put cameras in there. There's no. It's sealed off. It's
mhm,
hermetically sealed. So how could we know what's going on in family court? Though I understand that in England, they're going to do. The intention is to try to allow journalists, reporters into the family courts. I don't, not with cameras, I believe, but at least that they'll be able to report in full and not just what the court allows.
mhm.
So they may act as couriers to let the general public know what happens in these family courts.
Well, I know Zoom and well, because of COVID, that opened up the doors for Zoom to get in there, and people have, had court watchers go in and watch what's going on, which has been
Oh,
excellent.
Really? I didn't know about that. That's
Yeah,
interesting.
I've been on several court watching, and, watching these behaviors, I have written up a judge twice because he muted the, pro se litigant while she was giving her final arguments, while the opposing attorney was rolling her eyes and smirking, so I had to write her up.
Wow.
It just didn't end. And then I went on another one where the judge muted the father when he was trying to explain something. I thought, okay, all right, we need cameras in the courtrooms and
Yes.
tamper-proof mics, totally tamper-proof.
Right.
It,
Right.
you
So
know,
this footage that is getting out of court, is that legal? I mean, or is it people that are sneaking this
oh,
footage out?
well, when you go in there, they document your name and you're observing, court watching. So there's a list of people that even I mean, I don't know, I'm just going in there to watch these cases,
Yeah.
and, these judges don't know what personality disorders are. Oh my god.
Right. Right. Yeah.
Just abundantly clueless.
Borderline personalities and so.
Right. Because I'm watching these 2 cases down in Miami-Dade, Florida. I'm just, like, really shocked at how a judge can be biased against the mother, and then he can turn around and do another case where he's biased against the father.
Uh-huh.
I'm like, "He's crazy." But there's,
Yeah.
like, no rhyme or reason to, what's going on down there. It's
Uh-huh.
just so corrupt, and I've had other, fellows on my show where they're saying the bias is neck to neck. They're going after everybody. It's open season in family court.
Is it really? So what is it, just money driven now, you think, or what's
Yes,
going on? Uh-huh.
yes. Um, and, it's also if well, someone had said, "Well, whoever has the most money wins." Well, that's not always true. Um, I've seen, we'll say, people make, we'll say 200,000 a year, and then they'll go after the other party for child support, which makes no sense when the other party was caused to lose their job. How are
Uh-huh.
they going to pay over $1,000 a month in child support when they were caused to lose their job? And the judges don't care the wherefores and whys of how this individual lost their job.
Well, I would assume this is primarily being targeted, men are being targeted in that way, aren't they? Or
No, women are
really?
too. Oh, yeah, it's neck to neck. In fact,
Jeez.
I was a victim of this BS myself, because my ex is vice president of a foreign country, president of a company of a foreign country,
Uh-huh.
and, his wife works in the courthouse, so that's convenient, and, they had
I,
this thing rigged, and I that's why I wrote
uh-huh.
my book, but, um, I'm hearing from everybody, even men, that this whole thing is neck to neck. I've seen it even on these Zoom watches that, yeah, I mean, you would think, okay, so if a judge is, we'll say, nailing a father in this case, well,
Yeah.
he must be doing it to fathers. No, then he turns around and nails this mother. Like going, what is he? I
So
mean,
what do you think? Is he just going like, I like this guy, but this woman I don't like, or this woman I like, and this man I don't like, or something like that? Is it?
yeah, I think these judges are identifying with certain personality disorders that fit their own personality.
Oh my God.
I think it goes deeper than, bias. I think okay, I think it was biased at one time, but now the pendulum has swung back, and they are going after women, but they're going after men as well because it's a moneymaker.
Yeah.
And, even if, say, a judge grants custody to a parent who makes over 200,000 a year, but then says to the other parent, "You're gonna pay child support even, we don't care you lost your job. We're still estimating you at this income." They're not
Uh-huh.
being rash it's they don't
Uh,
people say, "Well, you can't get blood out of a turnip." Oh, yes, they can.
Well, that's right. If you threaten someone with serious imprisonment, they'll scrape money absolutely any way they can. But that's just, oh my. Well, yeah. I mean, I hear the stories of abuse. From the sources I know, it's mostly men that are targeted, but maybe that's not true anymore. For one thing, it used to be that men made more money, and really they don't anymore. Women are graduating and getting the advanced degrees at much higher rates than men are,
Mhm,
and never married women make a lot more money than their male counterparts. And so many women are now the breadwinners within families. So yeah, why not go after her if she's got the money?
mhm. And they're using, as you know, they're using these kids as pawns.
Yeah, terrible
Right.
child abuse, terrible child abuse.
Yeah, and if it could be any type of child abuse, but mostly I think mostly it's psychological child abuse.
Yeah.
And, these judges, I don't know, they've gotta get it together because we're building more prisons, and I see why.
Well, that's right. Of course, prisons have become a growth industry. That happened quite a long time ago. Has been privatized, so people make money. There's profit in owning and operating a prison. And so, if you
Mm,
build the prison now, you've got this pressure to fill it.
and that's disgusting because this can be, um, nipped in the bud. Um, for instance, okay, I know people want 50-50 shared, but that's not cookie cutter. Every case is different,
Every case is different.
right? Even if, okay, say a judge just says 50-50, but you've got a personality disorder
Yeah,
that is going to work their brainwashing methods or whatever they're doing on that child, then when the other parent gets this kid, they've got to deprogram and try to have a nice 5 days on or whatever the situation is. And
yeah.
or that parent is constantly texting the kid. This is what was happening in my
Oh,
case as well when it was my time to have
oh, jeez.
the games. And
Games. Well, and as you well know, many of these personality disorders can be very charming. These
Mhm.
these sort of sociopathic
Oh,
is
yeah.
a strong term, but they can charm like
Oh,
crazy.
definitely. In fact, my ex commanded a meeting of 9 teachers at the middle school, and, I didn't know about it. I get a call from the principal, and he said, "Why weren't you at the meeting?" I said, "What meeting?" "Well, didn't your ex tell you?" I said, "Why would he tell me anything?"
Well, that's right, and they should know that. For
Yeah,
heaven's sake,
right. And
that is such dullards if they don't get it. Of course they need to reach out to you.
and, not all men are sociopaths, because I'm helping a lot of guys. I see a lot of guys getting screwed over. But there are women also that are sociopaths and are destroying their own kids' lives
Yeah.
because they want to tick off the other parent. Come on.
Oh yeah. Yep. Use a child to punish the other parent. Yeah. Mm.
And, I don't know why these judges can't see a personality disorder. Why can't they see it?
I guess they're not trained to.
Well, but I mean, okay, family court judges, from what Judge Judy said, are, um, a dumping ground for morons. That's what she called family court judges.
Well, they certainly have almost no accountability. That's for sure. Yeah, they're.
And it's like you want men to be emotional and emotionally available, and, after I was divorced, I would date guys and they would not be emotionally available. They just because they had been through some weird relationship or their wife had cheated on them and they're just somehow detached, which is sad.
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's been a coping mechanism for men is stoicism.
Mhm.
You know, um, both the two sexes are equal partners in the human system, and they each apply an equal overall force of influence in it, and are equally responsible for outcomes. And one of the on the positive side, I think women and men have inspired each other. I think they've inspired each other to greatness in the human system. Camille Paglia once said, if there had never been men, we'd all still be living in grass huts.
Mhm, mhm,
But I think if it's equally true, if there had never been women, we'd still be living in grass huts. I think that men and women inspire each other. Uh, Man looks at woman and sees a kind of ownership of beauty, grace, goodness, home, family, parenting, basically all things along the love axis,
mhm,
and feels inferior to her. And through that, he feels a deep need to perform, achieve, and succeed his way into having what women are empowered to demand of him. And then looking in the mirror opposite, women look over at men and they seem to take an ownership of intellect, competence, prestige, toughness, strength, courage, all things along the respect axis. And so they also feel a deep need to compensate. And makeup is quite literally making up for, with a for the ways that women feel inferior to men.
mhm,
Both sexes feel both inferior and superior to their opposite sex. And that's been a source of great light when it inspires us to rise to the demands of the other, and a source of great darkness when each sex sort of enables the emotional addictions of the other
mm,
in a codependent sort of dance.
mm.
So, as in all things, there's the light side and the shadow side.
I think don't you think it's from how people are raised, and people are, sometimes raised not in a good environment anyway?
Well, sure, that's the so now we're going down the nature nurture rabbit hole, right? And that's
Yeah.
like a bottomless pit. That's like Alice falling forever in this with nature, nurture, which is which, which one usurps the other under what
Mm,
circumstances, which one's primary under what circumstances, are these tethers to our um, gender roles? Are they real? Are they elastic? These are the deep questions about gender, about nature, nurture. Is fascinating. I mean, that's a whole ocean of stuff.
mhm, mhm,
But yeah, of course, now looking at it from the nurture side, sure. Um, you know, Men and women since the Pleistocene, we've been born uh, with the biology, the social conditioning, the roles that we've been assigned at birth,
mhm, mhm,
and neither sex has been any more empowered than the other to break free of the concurrent fate that goes with that. Um, we've now reached a point where our awareness is high enough that we can look at these things. We can, it's only been fairly recent in human history we've even been able to ponder such things and wonder uh, what might we preserve and what might we change, and that it's up to us.
mhm,
You see, and I don't think there was awareness of that until fairly recently in the history.
mhm. So when you're writing, I know you have a book coming out in 2023,
Yeah,
you know, can you tell us a little bit about that, or?
sure. Well, it's called Equal Partners: The
Mhm,
History of Gender Equality. And it basically talks about some of the things I've already talked about looking at the human system in terms of a partnership, a male female partnership. I'm calling patra matra matriarchy.
Mhm.
Sometimes it's a patra matra census. Sometimes it's a consensus. Sometimes it's a male-female consensus.
Mhm.
Other times it's a balance of male-female power. Um, and See, to me, what I'm all about as a gender equalist, it's all about woman and man calling it even. It's all about this vision that I don't think I'll live to see, but this future
Mhm.
in which woman and man basically accord each other's politicized perspectives equally and agree to call it even and agree that the gender system is what it is as a result of a co-equal co-partnership, and that there's really no one to blame. There's really no reason for intersex rage, rancor, and resentment. That it's now time to understand ourselves as in a partnership and to work together. Um, it's about viewing gender issues as uh, matters of shared responsibility, and also to view them as mirrored. Um, for example, anorexia. See, so what might be the mirror opposite of anorexia? Well, if we look to men starving themselves, we won't find it. But you see, as men and women are the same but different, so the issues are the same but different. And if anorexia is women pursuing a self-destructive, perhaps even fatal path in their efforts to achieve a societal ideal of a quote unquote Barbie doll figure,
Mhm.
uh, then the mirror opposite would be males pursuing a self-destructive and sometimes fatal path in their efforts to achieve a societal ideal of a GI Joe physique.
Mhm.
So you see, the women are starving themselves, the men are abusing steroids and human growth hormones. But you see, they sort of parallel each other. On the one hand, we have um, sexual harassment. On the other hand, we have economic harassment. On the one hand, men seem somehow more important than women. On the other hand, women seem somehow more valuable than men. Um, Men more respected but less loved, women more loved but less respected. We need to start seeing these issues as mirrored, so that we can come together as gender politicians and discuss these issues without getting triggered, without getting so
Mhm.
worked up emotionally. We need to be able to maintain rationality and when discussing these things, even though they're deeply emotional. See, as a gender politician, I'm fascinated by all things gender, and I want to hear about sexual harassment. I want the details. I want a woman to explain it to me. I want her to tell me all about what that feels like and how it occurs, and I'll absorb it like a sponge.
Mhm.
But you see, I don't want to discuss sexual harassment with a feminist because she's too biased.
Mhm.
She believes men have the power and women are the victims. But you see, in discussing these issues with a fellow gender equalist, she knows that I know that she knows that I know that there's a matter of shared responsibility in all this, and that there's a mirror opposite. So when we're through talking about sexual harassment, we can talk about economic harassment, about how men, wealthy men, are often targeted for false accusations, extortion, uh, false paternity. Um, there are women that, in fact, I knew one who they marry a wealthy man with a preconceived intention of having a couple of kids with him, divorcing him,
Mhm.
accusing him of something, and
Mhm.
keeping the house, keeping the kids, and getting rid of him.
Mhm.
So these both sexual harassment and economic harassment run a gamut from men paying for dates, harmless thing, or sexual harassment. It's like, oh, you look great in that green dress, marry, whatever, right? So all the way to rape, but these things need to be understood as there's a balance, some kind of. I almost think there's a metaphysics involved where every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and these things parallel each other. Um, but to do that, we need to love men enough to empathize with them, and we need to respect women enough to hold them accountable.
Mhm.
And I don't see any signs that we're really prepared to do that yet.
I think it's because there are more personality disorders out there, I think, than there ever have been. That's my
Hmm.
opinion.
Well, that's interesting. Do you think that has anything to do with sort of the breakdown of family and the lack of fathers?
Yes, and even lack of mothers because, my kids were taken away from me based on lies that I was later exonerated of. Um, when these personality disorders and whatever they could be high functioning borderline, high functioning bipolar,
Oh,
high
sure.
functioning whatever, autism.
Well, super functioning, in fact.
Oh, yeah, definitely. I had worked with nurses that were high functioning bipolar.
Uh-huh.
So, and I mean, that's an incredibly stressful job,
Oh,
but not in when I worked in the ER, there wasn't any of that. But, I don't know. I think there really is more, um, personality disorders. I think parents are perpetuating these personality disorders well, even if there is a divorce, of course, that you drag your child through family court, then that will also enhance a personality disorder in the child.
yeah, of course.
But
And also, there's talk about every child being special, contributing to sort of a narcissism.
yes, yes. In fact, even in an intact marriage, you can these parents are saying, "Oh, we're so proud of the young woman you've become." And
Yeah,
it's like, "Wait a minute, because this is all on Facebook. Well, what did she do? Oh, she's a cheerleader." And I'm like, "But did she win a math like a award?" I mean, I never said to my child, "Oh, I'm so proud of the man you've become," and because what you're doing is you're inflating this kid's
that's
ego.
right.
Why would you do this? Create
That's
a narcissist.
yeah, yeah.
In fact, my son had to forfeit winning, um, he won something in his welding class. But the teacher took him aside and said, you deserve the award, but I need to give it to Johnny over there because he won't take it well that he's not winning an award."
Oh, geez.
Now,
Yeah. So there's so much for meritocracy, right?
right. And my son told me about this later after the fact. And I said, "How'd you handle that?" He said, who cares?" It's like, no, you should have fought that.
Injustice. Yeah.
Um, I wasn't there. I was not in that conversation, but that's just not acceptable. Everyone gets a medal, everyone gets a prize, we can't hurt
That's right.
anybody's feelings. Sorry,
Yeah.
but, life is hard, and if you worked hard for that medal, then you get the medal.
Yes, right. Well, I'm going to say something that might not be popular, but I think it has something to do with the feminizing of the whole school system.
Yeah, I don't know. I can only say that I was not really in that school system when my ex took over. I don't know if I can even, like, speak to that because, um, as a non-custodial parent, you're completely looked down upon even by people working in the office, much less the principal.
Well, you have rectified that situation, haven't you, or haven't you?
Well, all my kids have aged out, but when we were
Oh,
doing this,
yeah.
they're like, "Oh, we can't give you that information." Like, for instance, when my son broke his leg at gym class, I'm getting a call later from one of my friends to let me know he was in the ER with a broken leg. I was last to know. And it's like, these women are even doing it to themselves.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, yeah, the non-custodial parent is just treated horribly. It's just like a wallet or it's just a sperm donor or egg donor, as the case may be, and
Mhm,
doesn't factor. I I I've heard it said that one reason that courts don't like joint custody is because they like one parent to have the decision making, so that the courts will not be bothered with the disputes between husband and wife. The husband, one or the other has legal custody, and that parent has the decision making and leaves the court alone.
mhm.
I don't know if that's true, but that's one of the many things I've heard.
Well, I think it's, you know, um, I guess whoever gets custody of these kids will run into that school first and make it quite clear, here's the paperwork. Now I
Yeah,
have full custody of Johnny. And the other parent, everyone's saying, "Well, what happened to that parent? They must have done something really bad to have their kid taken away." So, when that
right.
parent calls and asks about Johnny, you know, you know, I I mean, I've even been
Yeah.
hung up on. So,
Oh my God.
I don't know
Yeah.
what to say. I really
Well, geez. I mean, the only hope I can see. I mean, guys like Chris Felder are doing a Herculean effort to try and bring more fairness to the family court system. Um, but perhaps about the only thing that can really break this thing open is if there was if the press were allowed in and could
Mhm.
record and report on what's going on, and people could see it and hear it for themselves and raise the official understanding of what goes on in family court.
Oh, I agree. I agree. That needs to happen. And I also believe family court should just be abolished and take it down to the civil level because if people are gonna call out false accusations of anything, it needs to be in civil court where there can be a jury and,
Uh,
y family court accomplishes really nothing but just running people through a mill and installing personality disorders in these kids.
well, one other point I'd like to make is why it's all leans toward corruption, so and false accusations and so on, and why ex-husbands and ex-wives act out in the worst ways is because they're they're threatened with what might be considered the worst thing that could possibly happen, losing their children.
Mhm,
And uh, that threat is so terrible that it certainly invites people to act out in the worst ways to prevent that from happening. And, if it's got to happen, make sure it's the other parent that it happens to, not me.
mhm, mhm.
And so that system of granting one parent the all important legal um, uh, custody, physical custody, um, invites the worst sort of corruption that way. As you well know, it's the most awful thing that could happen to someone.
Mhm, mhm,
It's almost worse than being threatened with death.
mhm.
Yeah. So there's no surprise that the parents are going to act out in awful ways if that's the threat.
Right, and, people can get along. I mean, I've had on my podcast these 2 parents that have exes, and they all get along. In fact, I saw, at a graduation party, the father talking to the ex-husband. They were both playing that game where you throw the beanbag. They were talking, having a beer, and
Yeah.
People, but they're mentally healthy,
Yeah.
and, people will say, "Well, you don't have to run into a courtroom because you're getting a divorce. You could each do it separately with an attorney or
Uh-huh. But
together with an
I
attorney."
understand that there's difficulties with doing that depending on the state. Is that true?
Possibly others, I mean, um, but people can just divide assets and
Yeah.
share the kids, and I think what scares people is the money issue of child support, and people, you know, if they decide on a figure and, you know, well, the one's helping the other one out, we'll say, okay?
Uh-huh.
So, you can go on your merry way, but when that person meets someone, say, who works in a courthouse or knows the workings of the system, they start chirping in that person's ear, "Why are you paying them that much in child support? Why"
Uh-huh.
okay, and then that person starts getting riled up and turning into a personality disorder based on that one's involvement. People have
Uh-huh.
to stop the third party chirping in the ear, and, if it's working, and it had worked for us for 10 years co-parenting until this woman inserted herself into
Mhm.
this relationship. I mean, we could have been fine with kids with no personality disorders. We really could have been.
Uh-huh.
So, it's my fault. I set them up on a date. Everybody knows it. I totally mea culpa that one. But, that's that's the worst thing people can do. If people are co-parenting and it's going smoothly, just shut up. That includes
Uh,
grandparents. That
uh-huh.
includes because, once there, begins a fight in these courtrooms where there's no fairness, even for instance, my son told the judge he wants to go back to 50-50, back and forth between the houses like we had done for 10 years.
And the judge wouldn't allow it, is that right? Is that what you're saying?
Um, he listened to the kid, but then he came out and twisted my son's words and used it to their own false narrative. I've got it in transcript.
Uh-huh.
And even my lawyer came out and said, the judge twisted his words.
Yeah, yeah, I mean, I get the impression that the whole legal system does its damnedest to pervert the relationship between the exes, to
Mhm,
suggest accusations. They'll sort of keep prompting, like, did he ever raise his voice? Did he ever raise, those kinds of questions? And
mhm.
um, there's just so much money to be made,
Oh, yeah.
and
Mhm,
if the um, if the exes settle amicably out of court, nobody gets that money.
mhm, mhm,
So I think it's not that easy for exes to just do a healthy negotiation and split the things 50-50 and be fair with each other when there's so many nefarious little I don't know
mhm,
influences that want to get them fighting and paying
mhm.
lawyers.
I think it's also the lawyer whoever picks, because my
Uh-huh.
divorce lawyer says, "Okay, so, I'll get the settlement or whatever from his lawyer, and then I'll look at it and, we just whatever, talked about it," and I just signed off and everything was hunky dory for practically 10 years.
Uh-huh.
So
Mm.
things, I think it's also like his opposing attorney was also of the personality of the judge, very, oppositional, defiant, very dramatic, perpetual liar. The lies spewed out of his mouth. Whoever shoots out the first lie is gonna win.
Mm.
And that's the first thing he did when we walked in there. And then when I went pro se, that really ticked him off. And it got to the point where it gets that he was more personal. In fact, my
Well, my
counselor
understanding about the pro se is that's a go between the children and the parents and the
oh,
court.
I'm sorry, that's when a parent represents themselves as a pro se litigant.
Oh, thank you for clearing that up. Okay, that's right.
Sorry, I'm sorry. Um, but when that happened, that ticked them off because the court doesn't like these pro se litigants because they're not paying into the system as you go with,
Right.
um But my counselor even said to me that she said, "It's not really between you and your ex anymore. This attorney has it in for you. It's him."
Uh-huh.
And I said, "Yeah, but, the ex can stop this at any time."
Hmm.
I I I don't know what to say. It's full of personality disorders that create more personality disorders.
Yeah. Yeah.
See, aren't you glad
Yes.
you talked to me?
Well, yes, yes. I, I'm a gender generalist, so I try to know something about everything to do with gender. But yeah, family court is its own bailiwick, and it's huge. And I only know some of what goes on with that.
Yeah, it's gotta stop because it's just destroying kids, and it's causing parents to commit suicide as well as kids, and these judges don't care.
Yeah,
Um, if I can go to a court watch and point out the personality disorder, I mean, come on. It's easy to point it's easy to see
uh-huh,
why they're not seeing it because they know another parent makes a lot of money.
yeah,
That must be it,
must be.
or they're
Uh,
being paid off.
mm. Well, yeah, it's gotten to a point where I think there's pressure mounting on the system.
Mhm,
I don't know how long it'll take before it's exposed,
mhm.
but but
Well,
there's millions out there that have been the victims of family court. But then I
oh, yeah.
understand that there's ways of silencing these people. That once they get through the whole ordeal, they sign some kind of a court agreement that they won't talk about the case publicly or something. And I think Chris Felder was telling me about that.
I'm sure, I'm sure there are, uh, judges that will do that, but I heard that is not even constitutional. You have your
Of
First
course,
Amendment rights, and a
yeah,
judge can't say you can't talk about your case. But, if they're threatening you with jail, I guess, it depends on how scared you are. It
yeah,
depends if you'll stand up and say, "I'm going to talk anyway."
yeah, yeah.
Well, I won't keep you too much longer. Is there anything else you'd like to add?
Oh, geez, just that it's been a pleasure. I really enjoyed talking with you, Marianne. I learned a lot, and really appreciate what you're doing to try and address something that is destroying the lives of millions.
Well, I'm glad to have you on, and I'd like to have you on again,
Sure.
especially, when your book comes out too as well.
Uh-huh.
Um, well, hey, don't jump off. Slam the Gavel's a podcast to help the public understand what really goes on in these family courtrooms that in turn perpetuate parental alienation. I'm your host, Marianne Petrie, author of Dismantling Family Court Corruption, Why Taking the Kids Was Not Enough, and Cry Out for Justice, Poems of Truth. Please join us again here in the future with Tim Goldich and other exciting guests. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Marianne. Thank you.